السابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا، من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So we've been doing this section regarding the different sects, and we began with the Khawarij, and in the last lesson we were on the section talking about the beliefs of the Khawarij regarding the Murtakib al-Kabira, regarding the one who commits a major sin and dies upon that major sin. So what is the ruling the Khawarij put upon a person who commits a major sin and dies upon it, not having repented from it? That's where we got up to, I believe. حكمه في الآخرة. So لما حكم الخوارج على مرتكب الكبيرة بالكفر حكموا عليه في الآخرة بالخلود في النار. So because the Khawarij, they declare somebody who's committed a major sin, dying upon that as having committed kufr, then their ruling upon that person is that he is in the hellfire forever. The one who commits a major sin and dies upon it is in the hellfire forever. واتفقوا على هذا جميعا. And all of the Khawarij, they are agreed upon that point of aqidah regarding the one who commits a major sin. وأن من مات مرتكبا لكبيرة لم يتب منها فهو في النار خالدا مخلدا فيها أبدا. And that the one who commits a major sin and does not repent and dies, then he is in the hellfire forever and he will never exit from there. But what are the evidences they use for this belief of theirs? They have several evidences that they try to use to prove that somebody who dies on a major sin will be in the hellfire forever as a kafir. One of those evidences is the ayah in the Quran, وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَةً قُلْ اتَّخَذْتُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا فَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ عَهْدَهُ أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ بَلَى مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ فَأُولَئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. This is the ayah, one example of what they used to say, مُرْتَكِبُ الْكَبِيرَ فِي النَّارِ خَالِدًا مُخَلَّدًا. The ayah where it mentions that they say the fire will not touch us except for a few days. Say, have you taken some covenant with Allah? Then Allah will not break that covenant. Or are you saying upon Allah that which you do not know? Rather, the one who commits a sin and that sin engulfs him, then they are the inhabitants of the fire and they will remain therein forever. The one who commits a sin, sayyi'ah, and that sin engulfs him, then those individuals are the inhabitants of the fire, hum fiha khalidun, and they will remain therein forever. The Khawarij said that Allah mentioned here, man kasaba sayyi'atan, whomsoever does that evil deed, sayyi'ah, nakira, mutlaqa, tadullu ala al-umum. They say this word is an indefinite word. It's a nakira, sayyi'ah. And an indefinite word in the Arabic language indicates generality. It indicates al-umum. فَيَدْخُلُ فِيهَا الشِّرْك. So shirk would come into that. Shirk would come into that. A person who commits shirk and is engulfed by that shirk, then they are the inhabitants of the fire and remain therein forever, no doubt. But they say because sayyi'ah is an open-ended word, it's a nakira which indicates a general open meaning, that it means shirk, and it can also mean and does mean the major sins too, they say. فيدخل فيها الشرك وكبائر الذنوب كما زعموا فمن وقع في كبيرة لم يتب منها فهو مخلد في النار كما دلت على ذلك هذه الآية. So they say the word sayyi'ah is an open-ended word. So yes, shirk comes into that, but also the major sins come into this ayah too. And therefore the one who commits a major sin and dies upon that, فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Then they are also the inhabitants of the fire and they will remain therein forever. That is their point of evidence. That is how they use that ayah. So how do we explain that? How do we refute their false understanding of this ayah? الرد عليهم أولا أن أهل البدع عموما يأخذون ببعض النصوص التي تتفق مع أهوائهم وما يبتدعون ويتركون ما يخالف أهواءهم ويبطل ابتداعهم والخوارج من هؤلاء. Firstly, generally we can say that all of the people of innovation, it is from their methodology that they will select evidences, they will select an ayah here, a hadith there, and take those selected evidences in isolation to try and then twist them upon the meanings that they want. That is the way of all of the people of innovation. And they do not combine between the evidences and all the other texts that would then prove that their understanding of this isolated evidence here and there is incorrect. They leave all of the other evidences. They do not combine between the evidences. They select in isolation and place their interpretation upon those isolated evidences only. And if only they'd looked at all the other evidences together, they would have understood the correct meaning of what they are looking at. أما أهل السنة فإنهم يأخذون بكل النصوص ولا يطرحون منها شيئا. As for Ahlus-Sunnah, the principle is that we take all of the evidences. We look at everything together in context, and we do not leave any of it aside, only taking isolated evidences so we can put our interpretations onto them. We take everything together. بل يستخلصون القول الاعتقاد من مجموع النصوص القول والاعتقاد من مجموع النصوص فيأخذون بالكتاب والسنة جميعا. As Ahlus-Sunnah, we look at all of the evidences, look at all of the texts, and that's how we then derive the correct statement, the correct aqidah from all of the texts combined in context to understand things properly. So here, this ayah is an example of the people of bid'ah isolating one particular evidence and placing their interpretation on it, because by itself, yes, sayyi'ah is an open-ended word. And so by itself, it does say somebody who commits that type of sin, any sin, then they are from the people of the fire and they will remain therein forever. By itself, they can argue major sins come into that as well. And by itself, sayyi'ah is an open-ended word. This is what they do. But as Ahlus-Sunnah we can say, من ذلك هذه المسألة وهي دعوى أن أصحاب الكبائر مخلدون في النار فإن الخوارج والمعتزلة مثلهم يستدلون ببعض النصوص التي تدل على عموم مغفرة الله وعلى خروج أصحاب الكبائر من النار. So the people of innovation use isolated evidences, the Khawarij with this example here, and the Mu'tazila on the other side, they use general evidences or isolated evidences to try and prove that a person, even if he commits sins, etc., is still okay. So here what we can say is, by looking at the context, you would come across the ayah in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive that you commit shirk alongside Him. But He forgives all other sins, all lesser sins, to whom He wishes. That ayah is a clear ayah. That the only sin that Allah does not forgive is the sin of shirk. And as for anything else besides shirk, the ayah is clear that Allah may forgive whomsoever He wills. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah does not forgive that you commit shirk alongside Him, but He forgives all else to whom He wills. All else within that is, of course, therefore, the major sins. They are not shirk. Shirk Allah does not forgive. All else Allah may forgive who He wills. And within that all else is all the other sins. Major sins, minor sins, everything else besides shirk. That is the only one that has been made as the exception that Allah will not forgive if you die upon it without repentance. So therefore everything besides shirk on Yawmul Qiyamah, we can say it is under the will of Allah, tahta mashi'atillah, under the will of Allah, because we know on that day certain people with certain sins, as long as it's not shirk, other sins, Allah may just forgive them anyway and they go to paradise. They are just forgiven. It is under the will of Allah. Other sins may just be pardoned and forgiven and you enter paradise, or those other sins may be wiped out by intercession that occurs on that day, or other things of that nature. So we understand from this clear-cut ayah that there is only one sin. If a person dies upon it without repenting, they will not be forgiven. That is the sin of shirk. All others, Allah tells us in the ayah, can be forgiven. All others are under the will of Allah. We cannot therefore say that somebody who commits one of these all other sins is going to be in the hellfire forever. If we're going to say that, then you've ended up on the other side, the side of shirk that Allah does not forgive, and we've established. And we cannot go to that side because Allah told us shirk is by itself, all others are on the other side and can be forgiven. ومما يؤكد ذلك ما رواه ابن جرير بسنده عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال: كنا معاشر أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا نشك في قاتل النفس وآكل مال اليتيم وشاهد الزور وقاطع الرحم حتى نزلت هذه الآية: إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء. فأمسكنا عن الشهادة. He said, us, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we used to have no doubt about the murderer and the one who takes the wealth of an orphan, and the one who testifies upon lies and falsehood, and the one who cuts the ties of kinship. We had no doubt about them, meaning that they were in the fire, etc. Until this ayah was revealed, then we stopped saying that. Meaning then it became clear that all other sins, you cannot say that this person is in the fire and this person will remain therein forever, etc. All other sins are tahta mashi'atillah. So they said when this ayah was revealed, then we realized none of these other sins come into that category. It is only shirk in that category, not even the one who murders, not even the one who takes the wealth of the orphan, not the one who testifies upon lies, not the one who cuts the ties of kinship. None of these other sins are comparable to the shirk on that side. قال ابن جرير في معنى الآية. So Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, who is known for the famous Tafsir al-Tabari or Tafsir Ibn Jarir, same person, and that is the best book of Tafsir, or it is the core. All other books of Tafsir, Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Tafsir al-Baghawi, whichever other book of Tafsir, they all go back to Tafsir al-Tabari, Tafsir Ibn Jarir. That is the core book of Tafsir. Ibn Jarir said in his Tafsir of this ayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ أَبَانَتْ وَقَدْ أَبَانَتْ هذه الآية. This ayah has made very clear أَنَّ كُلَّ صَاحِبِ كَبِيرَةٍ فَفِي مَشِيئَةِ اللَّهِ. That every person who commits a major sin is under the will of Allah. إِن شَاءَ عَفَى عَنْهُ وَإِن شَاءَ عَاقَبَهُ عَلَيْهِ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ كَبِيرًا شِرْكًا بِاللَّهِ. This ayah, he said, has made clear that everybody who commits a major sin is under the will of Allah. If Allah wills, then He may pardon and forgive that person. And if Allah wills, He may punish that person upon that sin, as long as it is not the major sin of shirk. Because if it's the major sin of shirk, then it's not under the will of Allah like the rest of these sins. Then it is under the ruling that they definitely will be punished and in the hellfire and remain therein forever. مَا لَمْ تَكُنِ الْكَبِيرَ شِرْكًا بِاللَّهِ. That's the tafsir of At-Tabari. And if you go to the tafsir of all the other scholars, the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, of Al-Baghawi, etc., Al-Qurtubi, they're all going to say the same type of thing, all revolving around the same kind of meaning, that shirk is the one sin that you cannot be forgiven for if you die upon. All other sins are under the will of Allah. ومن الدليل الصريح على أن مرتكب الكبيرة تحت مشيئة الله ولا يقطع له بالنار. And also from the clear-cut evidences that somebody who commits a major sin is under the will of Allah, and you cannot say he is in the hellfire for certain. You cannot say he is in the hellfire for definite. He is under the will of Allah. Clear evidence that indicates that also is the hadith of Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu anhu قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وحوله عصابة من أصحابه. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم mentioned to a group of his companions who were around him, بايعوني على ألا تشركوا بالله شيئا ولا تسرقوا ولا تزنوا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم ولا تأتوا ببهتان تفترونه بين أيديكم وأرجلكم ولا تعصوا في معروف فمن وفى منكم فأجره على الله ومن أصاب من ذلك شيئا فعوقب في الدنيا فهو كفارة له ومن أصاب من ذلك شيئا ثم ستره الله فهو إلى الله إن شاء عفى عنه وإن شاء عاقبه فبايعناه على ذلك. Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Hadith in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, clear cut, where the messenger was talking to a group of his companions and he said to them, Bayi'uni, take your pledge of allegiance to me. Upon what? Take your pledge of allegiance upon what? Upon the fact that you will not commit shirk alongside Allah, and that you will not steal, and that you will not fornicate, and that you will not kill the children, and that you will not fabricate and lie, make up the fabrications and lies and testimonies, and that you will not commit sin upon the affairs of obedience that you need to do. So whomsoever fulfills all of that, فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, then his reward is with Allah. وَمَنْ أَصَابَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ شَيْئًا, but whomsoever falls into any of that, فَعُوقِبَ فِي الدُّنْيَا, and he is punished in this world for it. Like if you steal, your hand is chopped off, fornicate, stoned, etc. Whoever is given that iqab, given that punishment for those sins in this world, فَهُوَ كَفَّارَةٌ لَهُ, then that is an expiation for that person upon that sin for the afterlife. But whomsoever falls into these fornication, stealing, etc. that are mentioned there, and Allah conceals his affair in this world, so he's not punished upon it in this world and not held accountable upon it in this world, steals, fornicates, but he's not caught, he's not punished, then فَهُوَ إِلَى اللَّهِ, then that individual with that sin of his returns back to Allah. إِن شَاءَ عَفَى عَنْهُ, if Allah wills, He will pardon him. وَإِن شَاءَ عَاقَبَهُ, and if Allah wills, He will punish him. فَبَايَعْنَاهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. So then Ubadah ibn Samit mentions, we all gave our pledge of allegiance to the messenger upon that. Hadith is very clear. Whomsoever commits these sins and is punished for them in this world, receives his legislated punishment, then they are expiated. But whomsoever does these sins and is concealed in this world and doesn't get his punishment for them, then فَهُوَ إِلَى اللَّهِ, then that individual, his affair goes back to Allah. إِن شَاءَ عَفَى عَنْهُ وَإِن شَاءَ عَاقَبَهُ, if Allah wills, He will pardon him, and if Allah wills, He will punish him. Therefore indicating that those major sins are all under the will of Allah. But at the beginning of all of those major sins, the first one that was mentioned was pledge of allegiance upon the fact that you do not shirk. So then why are we saying shirk doesn't come into any of this then? Shirk is mentioned alongside the stealing and the fornication and the killing. Because
we have the ayah.
The ayah tells us shirk is excluded. This would be another one of the things. If you took this hadith in isolation, it would indicate to you that shirk on the Day of Judgment is under the will of Allah. If Allah wills, He forgives it. But we know, put it into context, shirk is excluded. That is one that Allah does not forgive, and then all the others, they remain. There is no exclusion mentioned for any of the others in any text. So they all remain. If Allah wills, He punishes them. If Allah wills, He forgives them. So again, clear-cut evidence that the murtakibul kabira is not in the hellfire khalidan mukhalladan fiha. فهذا الحديث صريح في أن من أصاب من تلك الذنوب شيئا فهو تحت مشيئة الله تعالى. Clear-cut hadith that the one who falls into those sins, he would be under the will of Allah if he dies not having repented or not having received his legislated punishment in this world. He's under the will of Allah then in the afterlife. كذلك الأحاديث التي تثبت أن من مات على التوحيد فهو على سبيل النجاة ويرجى له النجاة وفي هذا أحاديث كثيرة صحيحة. Also, there are many ahadith that highlight that if a person dies upon Tawheed, then he is upon the path to salvation. That a person who dies upon Tawheed will not remain in the hellfire forever. Even if a person who dies upon Tawheed might end up in the hellfire for some punishment, the narrations, they highlight clearly that you are upon the path to salvation if you die upon Tawheed. Even if you are punished, you will not remain in the hellfire forever, because Tawheed is your salvation. So there are many narrations that indicate that if a person now dies upon Tawheed but has committed some major sin, then his Tawheed is the salvation ultimately, even if he is punished upon that major sin, even if he enters the hellfire for that major sin first. Examples of that, one of them is the hadith of Muadh ibn Jabal. Famous hadith, Ya Muadh, when the messenger said, Ya Muadh, أتدري ما حق الله على العباد? O Muadh, do you know what the right of Allah is upon His servants? قال الله ورسوله أعلم. He said, Allah and His messenger know best. قال فإن حق الله على العباد أن يعبدوه ولا يشركوا به شيئا. He said, the right of Allah upon His servants is that they worship Him and do not associate any partners to Him. وحق العباد على الله ألا يعذب من لا يشرك به شيئا. And the right of the servants upon Allah, meaning what Allah has granted us, not that we have any rights upon Allah, but what Allah has granted us is that the one who does not commit shirk with Him, then Allah will not punish him. The one who does not commit shirk at all, then that person will not be punished. فهذه الأحاديث, meaning if a person dies upon Tawheed, then he is upon salvation. فهذه الأحاديث وغيرها كثير جعلت أهل السنة يجمعون على أن من مات من أهل الكبائر من المسلمين فإنه تحت مشيئة الله تعالى، إن شاء غفر له ابتداء وإن شاء عذبه بذنبه، وإذا قضى عليه بالعذاب فإنه لا يخلد في النار بل سيخرج منها يوم من الأيام ما دام أنه مات على الإسلام. So these narrations like this and others that highlight a person who dies upon Tawheed, you are ultimately upon salvation. These narrations, they are the reason why Ahlus-Sunnah, they all agreed upon the fact, united upon the fact, that the one who dies upon a major sin, not having repented from it, is therefore under the will of Allah. If Allah wishes, He may forgive him from the beginning, and if Allah wishes, He may punish him upon that sin, and when he's been punished for it and purified from it, then he will not stay in the fire forever, but rather he will be removed and placed into paradise. وعلى هذا فإن الأدلة التي يستدل بها الخوارج والمعتزلة ومن أخذ بقولهم من أن أهل الكبائر كفار وأنهم مخلدون في النار هي بعض الأدلة الواردة في أهل الكبائر. This therefore indicates to us that the evidences the Khawarij use and the Mu'tazila, the evidences they use to come to their conclusions about the people who commit major sins and die upon them without repentance, and that they are in the hellfire forever, they are only isolated evidences they are using. One evidence here, one evidence there in isolation rather than putting them all together. وأهل السنة يجيبون عن أدلتهم التي يستدلون بها بما يكون فيه الجمع بين النصوص كلها وعدم طرح شيء منها. But as for Ahlus-Sunnah, we combine between all of those narrations. ثانيا إذا تبين هذا فإن الجواب عن استدلالات الخوارج ما يلي. So if we understand that, that's a general background. All of that was a general background. That all of the evidences they try to use to say a person who commits a major sin and dies upon it is in the hellfire forever, you have all of that general background to begin with. About the ayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. All of that background, that's the beginning. Then going into the specifics, specifically they were using the ayah, بَلَا مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ. They were using this particular evidence. So that particular evidence, بَلَا مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً, قد نص أكثر أهل العلم على أن المراد بالسيئة هنا هي الكفر والشرك. The majority of the scholars, as Imam al-Tabari, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari mentioned, the majority of the scholars, they have highlighted that this ayah is talking about shirk. The tafsir of that ayah, the sayyi'ah, even though it's an open-ended word, is in reference to shirk. Secondly, sayyi'ah, it is a nakira word, it is open-ended as the Khawarij mentioned. Nakira, amma, yadkhulu fiha. But if it is an open-ended word, which it is, and the Khawarij, they use that as a point, and they said therefore it's not just shirk, the major sins come into it too, it's open-ended. But if it's open-ended and the major sins come into it, then therefore the minor all come into it as well. Somebody who commits a minor sin and dies without repentance is therefore kafir in the hellfire forever too. If you're going to say it's open-ended, then even the minor sins come into it as well. يدخل فيها الصغائر فهي سيئات والخوارج والإباضية منهم إنما يجعلون الوعيد في أهل الكبائر دون صغائر. But the Khawarij, they want to say that no, it's only the people who commit major sins, not minor sins. But the evidence they are using and the way that they are using it, it necessitates that you have to allow the minor sins to go in as well. But they don't want to do that. They say, no, it means the major sins only. They go into it along with shirk, not the minor sins. But the reality of the way they are using the evidence, saying it's open-ended, would have to necessitate the minor sins go in as well. So this would again be a refutation upon them. فَعَلَيْهِ فَإِنَّ عُمُومَهَا مُقَيَّدْ عِنْدَهُمْ بِدَلِيلٍ آخَرٍ. So if they are going to say no, the minor sins don't go into it, they can only say that if they have some other evidence to therefore restrict the sayyi'ah to shirk and major sins. So even they are now going to have to bring some other evidence alongside the isolated evidence they are trying to use here, to therefore exclude minor sins, because if they don't exclude minor sins, then everybody is in the hellfire forever pretty much. So now they have to use some other evidence to try to restrict it. فإذا صح تقييد العموم بدليل أن الصغائر مكفرة باجتناب الكبائر كذلك عموم كلمة سيئة في الآية يخرج منها الكبائر وذلك بأدلة أخرى. So if they can now use this method of bringing another evidence along to highlight why it's only major sins that go in, minor ones don't, they're allowed to do that, then we can say we're going to stick to the same method as you, and we're going to bring an evidence, an ayah, to show you that actually even the major ones don't go in. You've shown us an ayah or an evidence that minor ones don't go in, excellent. We've got another evidence that shows you major ones don't go in either. They can't say, no, you're not allowed to do that. Or say, but you just did that to try and say that minor ones are out. We're doing exactly the same as what you did. You have given an evidence to highlight that minor sins are not in that ayah. We've now gone another evidence above you to give you the proof that major ones are not in there either. You're excluding minor ones with an evidence? Excellent, we do too. But we're also excluding major ones with an evidence. You can't say we're only going to exclude minor with the evidence, but the evidence that proves major ones are excluded, we're going to ignore that. You have to take all the evidences. فَكَلِمَةُ سَيِّئَةٍ فِي الْآيَةِ يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا الْكَبَائِرِ وَذَلِكَ بِأَدِلَّةٍ أُخْرَى. So we have many other evidences to show that. The ayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَنْ يُشْرَكَ بِهِ, being the main one. Then also the fact that they say وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ دليل على أن المقصود بذلك الكفر والشرك، فهو الذي يبطل به عمل أو يبطل به عمل الإنسان وتنتقل به حسناته وتحيط به سيئة الشرك والكفر. The ayah says وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ. Somebody who commits a sin and that sin engulfs him and takes him down. The only sin that can do that takes down all of your actions and finishes you, is shirk. So again, the ayah and the way that it's mentioned, وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ, would again indicate that this is in reference to shirk and not other sins. أَمَّا مَنْ كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ فَإِنَّ لَهُ حَسَنَاتٍ. So as for those who are upon Islam, those who are still upon Tawheed, they are not going to be completely engulfed by the sin. They are going to have some good deeds. The only one completely engulfed by sin is the one who has no Tawheed. He's upon sin engulfed in it, i.e. shirk. And his sin and his deeds are all gone. And his actions are all gone. But as for the believer, he's not engulfed in the sin to the extent that everything else is gone. He has his Tawheed still. If that's gone, then yes, he's a kafir, shirk. But the major sin is not going to engulf him to the extent that all of his tawheed is gone. That's the first one they use. The second evidence they use, وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. And also the ayah after that close by, وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَإِنَّ لَهُ نَارَ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. That whomsoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses the boundaries of Allah, then Allah will put him into the fire, remaining therein forever, and for him will be a disgraceful punishment. And the same with the other ayah, whomsoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, then for that person is the fire of Jahannam, and he will remain therein forever. قالوا فمن جاوز حكما من أحكام الله صدق عليه هذا الوعيد. They said, there you go, whomsoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses the boundaries, he is in the hellfire forever, the ayah says. They said, there you go then. Somebody who commits a major sin, has he not disobeyed Allah and the Messenger and transgressed the boundaries? Of course he has. The one who commits a major sin. And they say, therefore the ayah is telling you clearly, he's in the hellfire forever, and he has that terrible punishment. The one who disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses the boundaries. Somebody who commits a major sin, has he done those things? He has. They say, therefore the ayah is a proof that he's in the hellfire forever. قالوا ولا يماري أحد يؤمن بما أنزل الله أن مقارفة الكبيرة معصية لله. نعم. So they say nobody's going to disagree over the fact that if you're a believer in what Allah has revealed, that committing a major sin is not a sin against Allah. Everybody agrees that is a sin against Allah, and that's what the ayah says, if you sin against Allah and His Messenger. So now then, how do we reply to this evidence they are using? الرد عليهم إن المعصية هنا عامة مطلقة. Once again, whomsoever sins against Allah and His Messenger and transgresses, it's open-ended again. Any sin, whomsoever sins against Allah and the Messenger, it's open-ended, which from one angle is what the Khawarij want, because they want to be able to include
As many people.
the major sins. People who commit the major sins, they want to be able to include them. But when it's open-ended, like in the previous one, that also means the people who commit minor sins are in there too. So they're all in the hellfire forever as well, because they've sinned against Allah and the Messenger and transgressed the boundaries. You commit a minor sin, you've still done those things. So it's open-ended again. And that would mean everything comes into it again. وأهل-السنة يخرجون أصحاب الكبائر من هذا الحكم ويجعلونهم تحت المشيئة ومن دخل النار منهم لا يخلد فيها بناء على النصوص الشرعية الأخرى فعليه لا يصح للخوارج ولا للمعتزلة الاستدلال بهذه الآية على خلود أصحاب الكبائر. So it's the same as the previous explanation. It's open-ended, but that means the minor sins also come into it. The Khawarij will then say, no, but there's evidence to exclude the minor sins. You say, excellent. There's also evidence to exclude the major sins. So you're back to the same explanation with them again. Thirdly, استدلوا بالنصوص التي ورد فيها الحكم بخلود أصحاب الذنوب. So again, they use other evidences to highlight that the ones who commit sins are in the hellfire forever. An ayah they use, for example, فَمَنْ جَاءَهُ مَوْعِظَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ فَانْتَهَى فَلَهُ مَا سَلَفَ وَأَمْرُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَمَنْ عَادَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. That when the admonition comes to a person from his Lord, when the command and the prohibition comes, then he stops. Then good, what's gone by has gone by, but now he stops. وَمَنْ عَادَ, but whomsoever goes back to the sins of riba and other things, whomsoever goes back, then they, after falling into that sin, after the revelation has come about that sin, if they fall into it again, فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. They are inhabitants of the fire and they will be therein forever. And also, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. That whomsoever kills a believer intentionally, then his recompense is Jahannam, remaining therein forever, khalidan fiha. And Allah is angered upon him and curses him and has prepared a tremendous punishment for him. Killing somebody, is it shirk or a major sin?
Major sin.
Major sin. So again, they use these kinds of, and the previous ayah in the context of riba and those kinds of affairs, all these are major sins. They say these ayat are in the context of major sins and they are talking about those people who commit them staying in the hellfire forever. So now, this looks maybe a stronger evidence for them perhaps. وَكَذَلِكَ, and they have a hadith along the same context here. التي ورد فيها تحريم الجنة وذكر الخلود في النار على بعض الذنوب. They have some evidences from hadith that show if you commit certain sins, not shirk, sins, that you'll be in the hellfire forever. Again, it talks about murder, من قتل نفسه, or suicide in this case. من قتل نفسه بحديدة فحديدته في يده يتوجأ فيها في بطنه في نار جهنم خالدا مخلدا فيها أبدا. That the one who commits suicide stabs himself, then in the afterlife he will be there stabbing himself constantly and he'll be in the fire forever. Indicating the one who commits the sin of suicide, a sin, that he will be in the hellfire forever. خالدا مخلدا فيها. ومن شرب سما فقتل نفسه فهو يتحساه في نار جهنم خالدا مخلدا فيها. Whoever drinks poison and kills himself, خالدا مخلدا فيها, in the fire forever. And whomsoever throws himself off a mountain, again خالدا مخلدا فيها, meaning all these talking about suicide. The one who commits suicide, خالدا مخلدا, in the hellfire forever. Suicide, not shirk. It's a sin, major sin. So how do we reply to these? أما النصوص التي ورد فيها الحكم على مرتكبي بعض الذنوب بأنهم مخلدون في النار فلهم فيها أقوال. So there are certain evidences we can then mention regarding these. القول الأول أنها تحمل على من استحل تلك الذنوب فإذا كان كذلك فهو يكفر ويكون المذكور من العقوبة هو جزاؤه لاستحلاله ذلك الذنب وكفره بذلك. One explanation of them would be that these ayat and these ahadith are about the person who makes istihlal of those sins, declares them to be permissible, that shar'an, legislated, it is not haram to do these sins, it is halal and permissible to do these things. Then in that case he's rejecting the Quran and the Sunnah, rejecting the revelation, which is kufr. And so he is being threatened with those punishments as a consequence of his kufr in rejecting the revelation, not the sins per se. That is one way of explaining it. Secondly, أن هذه النصوص وردت مورد التغليظ وحقيقتها غير مرادة وقد استنكر كثير من أهل العلم هذا القول لأنه جعل الخبر الوارد عن الله تعالى في تلك المعاصي وعيدا لا حقيقة له وهذا يؤدي إلى إبطال العقاب لأنه إذا أمكن ذلك في واحد أمكن في العقوبات كلها. There's another explanation some scholars gave. They said these ayat that they'll be in the hellfire forever, the hadith will be in the hellfire forever, it is only to highlight the severity of the sin. This is a serious sin, to show how serious it is. Not that the actual point of him being in the hellfire forever is the reality. They won't be in the hellfire forever, but they will be severely punished, and these are severe sins, and that's why it's been mentioned in that severe way, you'll be in the hellfire forever. Just to show you how dangerous those sins are, not that you actually will be in the hellfire forever for those sins. That's what some scholars said, but others they said, that's not a good explanation to give. Others they said, that's not a good way to explain it. Because then that's like saying, these punishments that Allah is mentioning, you're basically telling us these punishments are not real. They're just threats and they're not real. And if you're going to say that about these narrations, you could end up saying that about all types of other narrations. This sin, this punishment, it's not really going to happen. That's just a threat. You could start saying that everywhere then. So some scholars said this explanation isn't a good way to explain this. Thirdly, third explanation, أن المراد بالخلود طول المدة لا حقيقة الدوام كأنه يقول يخلد مدة معينة. There's no explanation here, but this is a good explanation, which is that the ayat and hadith here, when they say that he will be there forever, in this context it is in reference to a lengthy period of time rather than an infinite period of time. The rest of the explanation isn't here, but if you go and check in Al-Aqidah Al-Wasatiyah of Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, there's a full explanation there of how these evidences could indicate lengthy periods of time, not infinite time. So they will stay therein forever, the one who commits suicide, the one who kills somebody, etc., meaning they will have lengthy punishments in the hellfire. And that is possible, that does, it is supported by evidences. You can find them in Al-Wasatiyah of Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen under that ayah, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا. The fourth possible explanation, أن المراد بذلك أن المذكور من العقوبة هو جزاء مرتكب ذلك الذنب إلا أن الله تعالى تكرم على الموحدين فأخرجهم من النار بفضله. This is good as well. That the one who murders somebody, the one who commits suicide, etc., the punishment that they are deserving of for those sins is that they should be in the hellfire forever. For the severity of those sins. That is what they are deserving of. But Allah, through His generosity and mercy upon them, does not implement that upon them. Due to their tawheed, etc., Allah exits them from the fire and does not place them into the punishment that they are deserving of for those sins. So these ayat are telling us what they are deserving of. But because of their tawheed, and when you put it in context, we know then Allah from His generosity does not apply this to the believers, even though the sin is deserving of that. The fifth explanation, أن النصوص فيها مقدر محذوف دلت عليه النصوص الأخرى التي تجعل ما دون الشرك تحت المشيئة. والمقدر هو أنه مخلد في النار إلا أن يشاء الله تعالى. That these texts, they have something that is implied within them. There is something implicit that isn't mentioned. And that is the fact that all the other narrations highlight, if you die upon tawheed, you don't stay in the hellfire forever. So it is as though these narrations and ayat are saying the one who kills somebody on purpose, etc., is in the hellfire forever, إِلَّا أَنْ يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, except for that which Allah wills. And we know for the believers who die upon tawheed, Allah wills that they will not stay in the hellfire forever. So there are multiple explanations to highlight that those texts do not mean that if you commit those sins you're in the hellfire forever. Because we have the explicit ayah and the hadith that told us it is only shirk that has that ruling. Everything else is under the will of Allah. So these evidences would not be correct to use to say that a person who commits those sins is in the fire forever. We'll have to stop there for today. We'll continue with the next section next week, inshallah ta'ala. Roughly at the same time again, straight after the Asr prayer. Come as soon as you're able after the prayer, and we'll begin, inshallah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.